Hi y'all, welcome back to my shop. Today's video is a continuation of my fruit video series where I started a few days ago with an apple. Today we're going to turn a pear. Very similar project, but it's got a number of, I've got two different chucking techniques on jam chucking because of the different shape. So if this is something you're interested in, keep watching. If you want to learn more about turning tips, tricks, and techniques, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future videos. So I'm going to use the same length of Sweetgum that I turned this apple from last week just because it was so pretty. It's beginning to crack on this end. When I cut it, I should have sealed it, but I didn't. But I'm just going to seal it a little bit, hoping this will weep in. It's not to keep it stronger, it's just to kind of fill in some of those blanks. So let me put some of that in. And I think I'm going to have this as the top. So we're going to turn it between centers. And I'll put a 10 in here. There we go. Now let's reverse it and the chuck. I'm going to use the 1/2-inch spindle gouge to shape the bottom. Alright, so I look at this and I think about what kind of profile I want. I look at this other piece of fruit I've got. You obviously can make them short or taller, you know, your preference. So on a blank this size, more than 2 inches, this is closer to 3 inches, I tend to want to use a little larger spindle gouge, 1/2 inch. So let's just start shaping it. Actually, spindle roughing gouge is really not a bad tool for working on the neck of this thing because it peels away wood very fast. And now I probably should mark where the end of this is going to be. I'm probably going to do a part in here. So that gives me a feel for shaping the bottom. So I need to probably go ahead and mark that part. So let's do that. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch parting tool to get in here and create a little gap. Something that might guide my eye. Give me room to kind of start shaping the back end of this. It's just a big bead. Lift the handle till it cuts. Lift, rotate, and twist it around. Get a little further over here, an adjustment. That spalting is really going to make this thing look pretty. Drop the tool rest a little bit. So now I can go ahead and move the tailstock as I do that indentation. I'm going to use my 1/4 inch detail gouge. The detail gouge is one that's got a very shallow flute that's kind of pointed that allows you to get into detail. So we'll just make that turn. And there we go. And now I'm going to clean up this profile just a little bit, get rid of some of these tool marks with a negative rake scraper. So we're going to come in here with this skew as a negative rake scraper and just clean up any nervous tool marks before we sand. Get rid of any little bumps or ridges. Alright, now I'm going to sand it and we're going to drill a little hole here for the stalk. I could go to the trouble of mounting this 9/64" drill bit into a Jacob's chuck and put it in tailstock, but it's not necessary. I got a nice divot here. I think I got a nice divot. Brace my hand here. And there we go. It's happened sometimes with wood that's spalted. Sometimes you get some punky area, so I'm getting a lot of torn grain here. So I'm going to harden the fibers a little bit by using a little sanding sealer before I sand it. And it'll make sanding easier, it'll make it a little stiffer, and it dries super fast, so it'll help make for a nice smooth finish. It's really soaking in. So I sand through all the grits. So let's go ahead and take this off and figure out how we're going to reverse chuck it to deal with the back end. So I'm switching to a larger chuck with larger jaws. That's the main thing. I just happen to have it mounted on the largest chuck I've got. Nova Titan. Now, noted woodturner Colwyn Way of Great Britain, when he demonstrated turning fruit, he made a cylinder jam chuck like this, which I thought was just a really good idea for this, out of a scrap piece of wood. Actually, it's the same wood that this came out of, I think. And I've got a tenon on each end, and you can make a jam chuck is somewhat of a, again, it's going to have about a 3mm taper on it. You can have a different size on each end. So I'm going to use the end that I've got opened up the most. And I have not used this before, so we're going to customize it to fit the pair that we've got here. Got it mounted. Now, so we're going to jam it in here, so I've got to go, I'll have to just look and see, but I'm going to have to open this up quite a bit more for us to get it jammed down in here. So now I'm going to open this up. I've measured the pear with a set of calipers, and so I've got a pretty good idea how much I've got to come in. It's like, I'll have almost a quarter of an inch on each side. So I'm going to use my box scraper held in here because it's got a nice sharp edge, and I can come in there at an angle and control it very easily. So let's get this up to about 1,000, 1,100. I probably should true up the end here just a little bit. Okay. I'm just going to take small cuts. Alright, let's see how we're doing. I think that'll almost hold it, but I'm going to go in there just a little bit more, a little bit deeper. My mini air blaster here. That's going to do just fine. I'm going to bring up the tailstock in the live center to center this, and I think that's going to work just fine. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and part off this waste. And I can tell it's running very true. Let's go ahead and get the tailstock out of the way. Move the live center. And I probably could wrap this with a piece of tape if I needed to, but I think it's in there strong enough. Speed around 1200. Just ease it in. Small cut. Okay, all we got to do is sand it. Let me see if I have tool marks, what I got here. With the sand will take care of it, or since it's in grain, I think I may use a negative rake there once around. Since the pressure is going in this direction, it's a pretty strong hold. I shouldn't have any problems. Let's hope. So I've got it sanded, got it concaved in. Let's go ahead and drill a hole in the bottom for the clove using a 1/8 inch hand drill. It's already got a divot in it. There we go. Now I could probably tap right here and it'll pop right out, but I want to show you that with the hole all the way through it, you can use a dowel about the size of your knockout bar and use that to knock out the fruit without damaging it, in case it really gets stuck in there. Crap. But it's only wood. Alright, so now we're going to drill that hole at an angle to put in the stalk. And we've already got that starter hole. In this case, I'm using a 9/64 since I want a little more room. And we're going to come in there at about a 45-degree angle. So we're going to make a jam chuck for the pear. Because of the shape of the pear, it's very difficult to just have enough flat area here to hold it just to get something flat. So I'm going to hollow this out as I'll show you. Some of this may duplicate what I had in my last video on apple, if so just kind of jump forward. But I want at least an inch back here that'll hold the screw, and then I've got to have close to an inch or so that I'm going to actually make a jam chuck because of the shape of this pear. So let me just quickly talk you through this process. I take that spindle scrap, turn it around, put a tenon on each end, and then I drill a through hole all the way through using a 9/64 to fit my particular screw. And I'm going to put the screw in from the back, similar to the apple chuck we used in the last video, and then I start hollowing it using a 1/2 inch spindle gouge to roughly shape the top of the pear. And after a ways and some trial fits, I'd switch to a box scraper so I can get kind of a 3-degree taper, like a Morse taper, and then I use a round nose scraper at the very bottom to fit against that pear. That's going to be close enough. it's important that you use a very small screw in here because you only want a small hole in the top of your pear, or as we did the last video, the apple. So I made a screw chuck for faceplate work based on watching Richard Raffin's video. This is a great screw chuck for a bowl or a platter, but this is too big a screw for this kind of fruit project. So I've taken this out, I've hollowed it out so I can put a screw in the back. Now this is the screw chuck I used last week for the apple, and it was just kind of flat, but Jason Breach made a screw chuck like this with a tenon on each end, so he could do an apple on this end flat, and on this one he's got an opening to fit the pear in. So I've already got that indentation. I'm going to drill a hole with the electric drill in the top of the pear. Put it on drill instead of screwdriver setting, get a little faster speed. That's plenty deep. So now I'm going to go ahead and mount this on there. And I'm just going to use a screwdriver to get it on nice and tight. And if it's off center a little bit, it's not going to matter. Put this back on the chuck. There we go. Okay, so now it should be running fairly true, and I can go ahead and part that off. And I'm going to do that with a thin parting tool, and then we'll make the final adjustments. So I finished sanding through all the grits on the end up to about 400. Now we're going to drill a hole here for a clove. I measure this particular clove and determine that a 1/8 inch drill bit will work just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and use my hand drill 1/8 inch. Get the tailstock out of the way and get the live center out of the way so I don't get Turner's elbow here. That's never happened before. Okay, turn the speed up a little bit. And the hole is centered and true, so I just drill in here a little ways. Drilling it too deep won't hurt. Now I'm going to take the clove and I'm going to knock off this little ball before I glue it in there. So then I get this very realistic looking clove that will glue in to the bottom. So I'm taking this scrap of walnut that was left over from turning the last apple and putting it in this SC1 micro chuck, which is great for these with the dome jaws. It allows you to get in nice and close. And with a through hole all the way through, you could have, for production turning, you could have a really long rod as long as it's smaller than your spindle shaft, and just keep turning one, pulling it out. It needs to be about 1.5 inches long. So let's get in there. A little bit off center, that's okay. Going to get the speed up to a couple thousand. I'm just going to planing cut here, getting round. You're going to take it down to about 1/8 of an inch on this end and 3/8 of an inch on this end. Of course, you can use a little wrench to calibrate the size. Got a little further to go. I'm finding it hard to get in there with the skew, so I'm going to switch to spindle gouge. I use my 3/8 spindle gouge where I can cut that curve real easily. I want a slight cove on this. Not too much pressure out here on the end. Okay, all we got to do is sand that and cut it off. Okay, I've sanded up to 400. Now we're going to use a little abrasive paste, which is going to in effect triple that grit. So I'm going to make this thing somewhere like 400, change 400 up to about 800 equivalent. Now we're going to cut that off at an angle. Put my block of wood underneath here so I don't accidentally hit the lathe bed. Got a little bit of a flat area right there, so I'm going to come across. Again, about a 45-degree angle. There we go. We'll just sand that with a little 400 grit, clean up those corners a little bit. So I knocked the ball out of the clove, out of my expensive $7 bottle of cloves for fruit, and glue that in the bottom. And then I'm just going to take the stalk that I've turned and put that in that 45-degree hole where this will be roughly flat. I'm going to finish this with something shiny, probably wipe-on poly. Maybe I'll hit a coat of acrylic, clear acrylic lacquer. Well, turning these pears was a fun project. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can use these same techniques for taking a scrap of wood and turning it into some other type of fruit, something, I don't know, kumquat or lemon as shown here. If you missed that video that I did week on turning an apple, you'll find the link up here. If you preferred one of the chucking methods I use for reversing these pear over the other, either the one with a screw or the one where I use a deep cylinder, please leave a comment below as to your preference and why. And remember, y'all stay safe and come on back, you hear?